Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. Oh yeah, there it is. I hit a button. We get to get all excited and all tingly and all excited again. Well, I can't wait to introduce you to the guest today. He is just this. What's to say? I mean, I have a whole thing of things to say, but I don't even know how to get through this. I'm going to try my best. He's brilliant. He's intelligent, so friendly. He's a thought leader though, and a speaker. And I'm thinking to myself, how the hell did we land this guy? Why is he talking to me? Why is he going to be on this show? And he's funny as hell. I can't tell you, a premier thought leader in the forefront of global competitive strategy. He's been in the pharmaceutical, the healthcare industries, named the industries he's been there, but talking through the idea of competition and also and how to really win, and branding and marketing and all these power things combined. Creator of the Transcender System, author of Brands Don't Win. I have the book right here for all you on video. President at Bernard Associates, Dr. Stan Bernard. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Casey. You're clearly giving me a winning introduction, so we're off to a great start.
Now, is it off to a great start, or are we all downhill from here?
No, actually, it's all we're gonna just roll. We're gonna roll.
Man, yeah.
Talk about how to win for businesses. That's what we're here to do today.
After we first chatted, I was like, I can't wait to get to this. I can't wait to get to this conversation. So let me go ahead and pass you this. It's heavy, but I know you work out. So 1 second. Here you go. Okay. Hey, Thor's hammer. You got it? Here, grab it.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
You grabbed that with a couple fingers? That's the first time. You're strong, man.
Yeah.
Strong. Hey, take Thor's hammer and smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Set the record straight once and for all.
Awesome. It's very simple. Branding is not the only way to win in business.
Whoa. It's not?
No.
Isn't branding like the heart and soul of all things marketing?
Yeah, actually, that is the assumption that virtually every company and every business professional believes, that they actually just assume that the only way to compete in business is with branding.
Right.
If you look, virtually every company, no matter whether they're selling a product, service, technology, no matter what marketplace, no matter what industry, virtually every company says we're going to create a brand and we're going to differentiate a brand, usually with lots of promotions, advertising, sales reps, etc. And they assume that that's the only way to compete. And I'm going to bust that myth.
Smash it.
Smash it.
Took Thor's hammer and just obliterated the hell out of that thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I do in Brands Don't Win. I smash it. So, in fact, branding actually has been around for over 3,000 years. 3,000 years.
Whoa, 3,000?
3,000 years old. So the Greek basically artisans in the Athens marketplace 3,000 years ago were basically engraving their pottery with their brand name effectively, and then trying to differentiate their pottery and other artisan, tools and gifts and things like that from their competitors. Okay.
Wow.
So it's 3,000 years old. Okay. I don't know about you, but I'm not using 8-track tapes, and I'm not using rotary dial phones, and they're only 50 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Yet the majority, virtually every company in the world, uses a 3,000-year-old way to compete. And branding wasn't even initially designed for competition. I mean, it was really designed to distinguish between livestock, literally branding cows and other livestock, right? So that idea that people assume that the only way to compete, and they don't even question it. I mean, when I say to people, how else can you compete beyond branding? I get the deers in the headlight looks, deer in the headlight looks. Like, seriously? What do you mean? I mean, of course, that's the only way to compete. Well, I want to tell people on this call right now, tell your listeners that you can break out of the brand jail, you can shake off the brand cuffs, you can stop being brand washed. Okay. There's another way to compete. There's actually a better way to compete. It's called the Transcender System. And this is what I outline in detail, the 3-step, powerful, practical system for winning called the Transcender System that I have developed over the last 4 decades by analyzing literally hundreds of companies and thousands of products around the world.
Wow. Okay. So a couple of things here, and I want to get to those 3 steps. I want to learn the how, but before to that, why are we locked into Greek mode? Oh, you got the Papulius pottery. I see. How are you doing with that? Like, why are we still doing that?
It's fascinating to me. I often ask that same question to my clients and other potential clients and customers. And I really believe it is a brand washing. If you think about it, it's just been passed down from generation to generation. Everybody just assumes that's the only way to compete. I think part of it is it's historical, right? It's been handed down. I think the other part is that there are companies, obviously advertising companies, marketing companies, and others that also try to brand wash us, so to speak, by believing the only way to compete is with branding. And then they'll go into all the different types of branding. There's brand logos, and there's brand equity, and there's brand ownership, and there's brand product value statements, and brand positioning statements, on and on and on, right? Brand. But it's all branding. No matter how many times you say the word branding and try to make it more complex, it's very simple. Branding is very much like checkers. It's like everybody's playing brand checkers. Okay. The idea being pretty much everybody knows the brand game, right? Agencies know it, companies know it. And as a result, it's very difficult to win when everybody's playing the same game, and a game as simple as checkers, right?
Okay.
So because it's
Know thy enemy. What clear up for us, because I think also part of this is we ascribe to branding a lot of things, and that's how it becomes like the solution to everything, is because digital marketing and advertising, it's all branding now. But it's like it's not. What is branding actually? Like what do you, when you boil it down, distill it down?
Yeah, I think the approach to branding, really what branding is saying my brand, my product is differentiated from your product. It's brand differentiation. It's saying my product is differentiated usually on certain features and benefits. And then we use all these different brand promotional tactics, advertising, sales reps, et cetera, to try to push those distinctions, those differentiations. So branding is really about differentiating your product from some other competitor's product, usually based on slightly better features or benefits. Now, again, that's the old model. Okay. And as we said, it's 3,000 years old.
And you put features and benefits into that, because that almost seems like just what companies do to sell, is they just think features and benefits. And
right. Well, that's all they think.
Yeah.
Honestly, companies only think about competing in one way, which is branding. We're going to have a product that's better than the competitor's product, slightly better. We're going to basically sell you over and over with brand messages, right, in various formats and various media outlets and channels, et cetera, about how our brand has advantages over competitors. Okay. Yeah. Brand differentiation. That is the model. Okay. And it's a model that's not even designed for winning. It was never designed as even for competition. So what I did is I have, for the last roughly 35 years as a global competition consultant, studied these different types of companies, all different types of industries, all different types of markets, et cetera. And I came up with what I call the Transcender System. Now, here's where the Transcender System is different than what I call the traditionalist system. So when I refer to the traditionalist system, that is the traditional branding model. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's numerous differences between the two, but perhaps the single biggest difference is that in the Transcender System, you do not play the brand game. Companies actually create and play a game only they can win. Okay. Imagine that. Instead of being in the brand prison where you have to play the same as that game everybody else is playing, brand checkers, you have the opportunity, if you're a Starbucks, if you're an Amazon, if you're a Peloton, to play whatever game you want. You literally get to create the game. And the whole premise behind the Transcender System is that you play a game only you can win. Why play a game that your competitor, why play your competitor's game? Why play the same game everybody else is playing? Play a game only you can win.
Right.
I mean, classic example of that, the Starbucks. people assume Starbucks, everybody knows the Starbucks brand, right? So they
I was gonna
assume,
say I was gonna try to like push back on you a little bit and say, yeah, but what about Starbucks? I mean, isn't it the brand? Isn't that why they win?
you would assume that.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, like others, you would be wrong, to be
interesting.
fair.
Yeah.
And here's basically a little quick history on Starbucks. Starbucks, for the first 16 years, they started in Pikes Peak Market in Seattle with their first store in 1971. The first 16 years, they tried to win with branding. So they had the Starbucks brand name, they had the Nordic Siren logo, they had the Starbucks branded coffee, the Starbucks branded coffee cups, you name it. They had all the branding. I
Okay.
mean, if you saw their store, it was Starbucks was everywhere, right? For the first 16 years, they were adding one store per year. They weren't winning. Okay. Howard Schultz in 1987 buys Starbucks and says, we're not going to play the branded coffee game. I'm going to change the game. And he came up with a 3-word, what I call campaign agenda or game. He said, we are going to become the third place, 3 words, the third place between home and work in America. That's why you have a Starbucks on one side of the highway on the way to work, directly on the other side of the highway on the way home from work. It's why you see Starbucks at major transportation hubs, corporate centers, malls, etc. It's also why Starbucks has a bigger footprint. Their stores are much bigger. They do not want you to just grab a cup of coffee like Dunkin' Donuts. They want you to grab a chair. And it's a comfortable chair. It may even be a couch. Oh, by the way, we have big tables. You can spread out. You can do your work here. So on the way to work, you can meet some of your colleagues. And on the way home from work, you can meet some of your friends. We want you to hang out. We've got welcoming baristas, nice music, clean bathrooms. It's all about becoming the third place. Starbucks has basically told us this is where you go between work and home in America. And that's an important distinction between transcenders. They do not ask, they tell. They have told us to the point where we do it. And I often say to people, Starbucks the best coffee? I'll ask patrons, Starbucks the best coffee? And inevitably, I've never heard anybody say, oh yeah, it's the best coffee I've ever had. No, because it's not about the coffee. Basically, Schultz said it's not about the coffee, it's about the coffee shop. They went from adding one store per year to adding 1,350 stores per year. That's almost 4 stores per day using this Transcender System approach. They are the biggest coffee chain in the world with over 31,000 stores across over 80 countries. They're 3 times bigger than Dunkin' Donuts. And Dunkin' Donuts actually spends twice as much on advertising as Starbucks in the US.
Right.
And yet Starbucks actually sells 3 times more coffee.
That's interesting. I have seen Dunkin' Donuts commercials, but I don't know the last time I saw a Starbucks one. You just know what it is. You don't need to advertise it. You just see the sign, and they're near you, and they're on the path between home and work, like you're talking about.
That's right. And they have played, they played their own game. It's not an advertising, branding, promotions game. It's a game where we're going to give you, and this is very different with transcenders. They're not trying to sell you a product like coffee. They're basically trying to inspire you with what they call at Starbucks, the third place experience. So branders want to basically sell you products, and it's all about a product transaction. Transcenders want to basically inspire you, and it's all about the experience. So people get the experience. They understand, oh, I go to Starbucks, I can relax. I don't have to race out of here. I can meet friends. They want me to stay here. This is a great place to hang out, and Wi-Fi, etc. So that is a huge distinction between the 2 worlds, as I call them, because the transcender world is really a revolution. I mean, it is a paradigm shift in how companies compete. The idea that you can compete any way you want. You don't have to be locked into one single option, which is branding.
How do I do this? You mentioned there's three parts. I'm intrigued. I'm bewildered. I hear you on Starbucks, and I'm inspired now to make my own version of Starbucks in my own industry. So how do I do this? What are these steps?
So there's 3 steps to the Transcender System.
Okay.
The first and most important is to create the agenda. Now, let me explain what I mean by an agenda. Brand companies lead with their brand, right? Whatever brand or product they have, they lead with the brand. Transcender companies don't lead with the brand. They lead with a campaign agenda and follow with the brand, just like politicians. So if you look at US presidential elections, and put aside politics, I know everybody has strong feelings about politics, but if you look at Obama and his run for 2008 to be the president, he didn't start with vote Obama. He didn't go around telling people vote Obama, vote Obama. He said change, 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 change. That was
I think
his
it was like hope and
word.
change, right? It was like 2-word.
So he actually, change was the overarching campaign agenda. He has what's called C messages, campaign messages. So change and hope was one of the C messages, be the change, et cetera, et cetera. So you have messages, campaign messages. You don't have brand messages in the transcender world. You have basically these campaign messages, but his overarching campaign was one word: change, 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 change. He led with that. And then if people were inspired by the idea of change in America for the 2008 presidential election, then he was the only change candidate. And that is the positioning. So he's the brand. So they led with the agenda, the campaign agenda, which was change. And then he is the change candidate. That's the positioning of him, just like products have positioning. So this is very different. Similarly, in 2016, everybody knows Trump's campaign agenda, 4 words: make America great again. He could have said vote Trump, vote Trump. He was a brand. He was fairly well known, as a TV, apprentice, leader, and also as a real estate developer. He could have led with the brand, but he didn't. He led with 4 words: make America great again. And then if people believed in, and I say believe, not bought in, but if they believed in and were inspired by his agenda, then he was the one positioned to make America great again. That was his campaign platform. So that's what companies do as well. Companies lead with their campaign agenda, follow with the brand. Classic example of that is Nike. Everybody knows Nike's campaign agenda: just do it. Okay, 3 words: just do it. And then they say, and they follow with Nike, right?
How do you know they follow, right? Because I know the swoosh as well, just as much as I know just do it.
Yeah. So you can see how these, again, presidential candidates, it's obvious. With companies, Nike will say, just do it. And then below that, Nike, right? They lead with Nike, and then you'll see the swoosh, then you'll see Nike. So you still use brands. I think this is very important. Companies still use branding in the Transcender system. They just don't lead with it. So basically, branding went from being the lead actor, so to speak, in the traditionalist world to more of a supporting role or supporting actor role in the Transcender world. So we still have brand statements, brand positioning. Right. We still have brand logos. We still have brand images, characters, all that, but you don't lead with the brand. You lead with a campaign agenda designed to inspire people and then follow with the brand. Okay. So that is the first step, is creating the agenda. There's 3 ways to do that. Basically, you can have create competitive creation. So you create the agenda de novo. So that is what basically Starbucks did. The idea of the 3rd place was something they totally created. It was an idea they had. You can have competitive recreation. So for instance, Peloton. Again, people all know Peloton's brand, but that's not how they win. They win by recreating a world-class home cycling studio. That was their original agenda. They are all about creating this world-class cycling studio experience for the home. And then if you believe in that, if you believe, oh, that's a great idea, instead of having to go to a cycling studio, get dressed and go at what time they want me to, and go only to their instructors and use their bikes, which are inferior to Peloton, etc. Then if you believe in that, then you're going to basically purchase a Peloton bike, okay, if you can afford it, right? So that's how they basically played the game. They recreated that cycling studio. And of course, anybody that talks to a Peloton user, they'll go on, and we'll get into the fact that they basically create evangelicals, these passionate proselytizers. They go way beyond product advocacy.
It's not because of the brand, because they have got a great brand. It's kind of hard, isn't it? It's like entwined.
Yes, and it is. And so these come again. I didn't say it in the book. I didn't say brands don't matter. I said brands don't win. These companies that I'll talk about, and there's a number of companies. I have 16 different case studies in the book, and there's literally hundreds I've analyzed over the years. and worked with numerous clients to become transcenders. Again, their brands are often well known, but that's not how they win. Okay, that's the difference. So there's a third way, and probably the most common way to create an agenda is what's called competitive categorization. You either create a new category or you own a category, a new category. So in the case of Seedlip is a small company, a startup in the UK, started by Ben Branson, an entrepreneur. He basically was trying to find a good mocktail on a Saturday night in London, couldn't find it, started his own company, which Seedlip is the name of the company. He had a background in both advertising and farming, and created his own distillation system, and basically created the world's first non-alcoholic spirit. So he created his own category. They now command 70% of that. There's over 50 competitors, but they command 70% of it. And within 5 years, he had sold out to Diageo, okay, which is the world's biggest spirits maker. So that is creating your own category, de novo. Others own a new category, Uber. Everybody assumes that Uber basically started the ride sharing business or ride hailing business. Actually, the ride hailing business goes back to the 1600s when we had carriages and, horses, right? And then we had taxis, and then we had limousine, and actually ride sharing is really the third type of ride sharing or ride hailing. But actually Sidecar was the first company to have the patent 7 years before Uber for basically sharing as we know it, calling a car with an app and then sharing somebody's local car, etc. But Uber realized, oh, we are going to move from our business, which at the time was a black car business called by an app with a driver. And they basically said, we're going to take over this this particular space. They moved in, owned it. They had the most money. They had the most drivers. And we all know that Uber not only everyone's private chauffeur, which was their original agenda, but now they're setting the world in motion. That is their new campaign agenda, because now they have freight, they have Uber Eats, et cetera, right? So again, those are the three ways to create the agenda.
So real specific, what did Uber do that was different from Sidecar? What, I don't even know about Sidecar.
Yeah. A lot of people outside the San Francisco area wouldn't know about them. The key thing they did is they basically got more investment. Because they had more investment from venture capitalists, they could then basically pay to have more drivers, more systems, more support. And the game was at that time, whoever had the most drivers would win, right? Because you didn't want to call service and you have to wait 15, 20 minutes. Uber could be there in a very short period of time. And of course, Lyft also quickly jumped in that space, but Uber ultimately owned the space, and they owned it with this Transcender System concept. Okay, originally everybody's a private chauffeur, and then moving to setting the world in motion. I mean, now Uber's a huge company in moving all different types of things, everything from packages to people to food, et cetera, et cetera.
So they got more investment. And are we saying that they did that because they're transcending?
Yes, it was clear to their funders, their financiers. Oh, these guys, they had the big picture. Now, to be fair, Uber had already been successful, was already starting to be very successful with their black car service, right? So they also had, in some ways, the systems in place. They had a more expansive offering, and they had a bigger picture. And this is important. Transcenders think, act, and go big. Okay. They're not going for a small piece. Sidecar was not looking as big. They weren't as expansive. Transcenders are out to own their market and potentially other markets. And Uber's a classic example of that. Uber said, it's not enough just to own the ride sharing business. We're going to try to get into the food delivery business with Uber Eats, which of course they're a major competitor there, freights, logistics, all different types of ways to move. So that is the mindset of a transcender. And that's different than the traditionalists. Traditionalist brand companies typically are saying, you know what, I'm going to try to do better than my competitors in my marketplace. Okay. A transcender says, I'm here to own and dominate my market and even go beyond that. For instance, Peloton. Peloton could have stuck with basically, we're just going to focus on the home exercise equipment market, right? But they didn't do that. They didn't do that. If you see what their executives say to the analysts and what they have basically publicly said in the media, they are going after fitness clubs, right? Health gyms, cycling studios. There's 36,500 of those in the US alone. They have basically said that is our market. So it's not enough for them to own just the home exercise market, right?
Yeah.
That's too small. That's too small. Transcenders go big. They go much bigger, and they think big, act big, and they play big.
And they realize that half the people in the gym are introverts and none of them want to be there.
Well, think about it. It's in this, they didn't have just one slight advantage. It wasn't like just their bike was slightly better than some other stationary bikes at home. No, they had dramatically better bikes. They had the offering of being at home, so the convenience is unparalleled, right? They also offered all these different types of instructors, right? So you didn't have to stick with just your local cycling instructor at your local club.
Yeah.
They also basically made it a social experience. I mean, this is really a Peloton experience. And anybody you talk to that basically uses the Peloton bike or their other, fitness equipment, they will tell you it's great. I get to ride and compete against other riders. I have a friend that basically is one of these, again, what I call evangelicals. He is so into it. As soon as I say the word Peloton, he just starts going off, right? And he starts telling me, well, I know what gear this person was in, and I gave that person a high five, and I wasted this person up the hill, and, and he's got all the metrics and all this. And what that means is Peloton has so many of these, what I call evangelicals, a portmanteau, meaning basically an advocate crossed with an evangelical.
Yeah.
Okay? They have so many that they have told Wall Street, they've told the marketplace, we don't need to spend as much on advertising and promotions. We've got all these people out there doing it for us, right? Because it's like an election. Products today are elected, not selected. So you get all these people inspired the same way people got inspired for Obama in 2008 and Trump in 2016. Peloton's got the Peloverse. They've got all these people out there telling everybody else. They're selling their bike, their tread, all their different types of offerings on behalf of Peloton. So Peloton literally has said we can cut back on advertising promotions.
All right. So you got to create, you can't just play by the old rules.
No.
You got to create something new. And that's
right.
that's all under number one. That's all under the agenda.
Right. That's right. So second is communicating the agenda. Okay. Just like a politician, these companies have to get out and communicate the agenda. Now there's 4 criteria I list in the book. They are under the acronym MOWA, MOWA. They stand for memorable, ownable, winnable, and alignable. The first and most important thing about an agenda is it has to be memorable. Turns out that humans today can only remember 4 plus or minus 1 chunk of information or digit in our short-term memory. Okay. We have lost 43% of our short-term memory over the last 20 years. Okay. That's due predominantly to our over-reliance on our iPhones and other devices. We don't have to remember phone numbers, names, etc. So as a result, if you want something to get into long-term memory where it can be repeated, like we've talked about, like Make America Great Again or change whatever, it has to get into short-term memory. To get in short-term memory, it has to be basically 5 words or fewer. I recommend actually 4 words or fewer. But so that's why you see, first of all, U.S. presidential candidates, all the winning presidential candidates of the last 100 years, with the exception of 2, have all had a campaign agenda or slogan that's 5 words or fewer. Same thing with companies. Companies have very short campaign agendas. Okay, 4 words or fewer, typically. Classic example of a memorable, simple campaign agenda would be Geico. They have a 4-word campaign agenda. 15 minutes, 15%. 15 minutes, 15%. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance. That is a C message. Okay. Everybody knows that. Why does everybody know it? Because Geico's been telling us that same 4-word campaign.
Same ones. Yeah, they haven't changed it
since 1999.
Wow.
Okay. And this is, again, totally different than traditional branding companies. Traditional branding companies are constantly changing their message because they're worried about brand fatigue, and we have to have something new, every 3 months, 3 years, whatever it is, right? And advertising agencies are constantly trying to change. Not Geico. Geico's broken all the rules. They are totally being a transcender. Their biggest competitor is State Farm. State Farm for years has basically played the insurance salesman game.
Right.
It's all about their 19,200 insurance sales professionals around the country. Okay. Well, Geico realized they were in 5th place in the mid-90s, and they said, we can't keep playing this State Farm game. We don't have as big a network. We can't play that game. We're going to change the game. Not only are we going to change with our agenda, 15 minutes, 15%, we're also going to change how we basically communicate our agenda. So they started advertising insurance. When they started doing that, particularly in 1999, at the time, the belief was among traditional brand and advertising experts that you can't really advertise insurance. You can't feel it. It's not a product. You can't see it. You can't touch it. Geico said, no. We're going to change the game. We're going to actually advertise, and we're going to use it to how we communicate. That's how we're going to communicate our agenda. And not only are we going to advertise something that everybody thinks we can't advertise, we're going to do it differently than anybody's ever done it before. So they have multiple different types of characters. They don't just have the gecko. They have the caveman, so he's a caveman, can do it. They have Max the pig, wee, all the way home, right? They have celebrities on and on and on, right? And they run these commercials at the same time. This is totally against the rules of advertising. Rules of advertising are you stay with one type of commercial and you only have one mascot, okay? Geico said, no, we're playing by our rules. We're going to play the game the way we want to play it. And as a result, they went from being 5th to now 2nd among auto insurance companies in America, and they're breathing down State Farm's neck. Okay, again, because they played this game. So they're absolutely a classic case of how to make something memorable, right? In fact, in October of 2020, they had a commercial with the gecko, and he was explaining how he came up with the idea 15 minutes, 15%. Okay, I mean, they make fun. Everybody knows it, right? They make fun of us, right? So then in addition to that, there's Ownable. You want to have an agenda that's ownable. Classic example of that to me is Sweet Green, the salad store. Sweet Green, basically their campaign agenda, connecting people to real food, connecting people to real food. And they literally do that. They vet and have their own local farmers, right? And they even have technology now that can identify in some stores exactly what farm your particular vegetables came from. Okay, so they can literally connect you to the real to real food. Not only that, they also offer them incredible access. I mean, they have these outposts. They literally bring the food to corporate centers and other major centers. So they make it very easy. So they absolutely have an agenda that they own. They absolutely own it. We talked about Nike having a winning agenda. No question about it. Just do it. Nike has got 35% more market share than Adidas since they started that campaign in 1987. A lot of people don't know that 1987, when Nike started that, they were losing to Reebok. A lot of people don't realize they were losing big time. In 1987, Reebok had 45% market share in North America of sports apparel and shoes. Nike only had 18%. They were losing big time. They got together in 1987, said, we have to change the game. That's when they changed the game to just do it. The idea was that, well, we'll let Reebok focus on the athletes. We're going to focus on everybody. Everybody can do it. You know, whether you're a young girl in high school or an 80-year-old marathoner or a guy that's on the couch that doesn't typically get up, everybody can just move. Everybody can just do it, but do it in Nike clothes and shoes, right? That's the idea. So, so they absolutely had a winning agenda. We know that. And then the last one is basically the idea, and it's MOA. So it's basically the idea is you have to align. It has to be alignable. Everybody at your company has to align behind it. This is different than branding companies. In branding, you win basically marketing and sales. They're responsible for competition, okay? In the Transcender world, every single employee is aligned behind that agenda. The archetype for that is Amazon. Amazon basically has a two-word agenda. Jeff Bezos has been saying this since his 1997 shareholder letter. It is customer obsession. Customer obsession, customer obsession, customer obsession. Jeff Bezos has said repeatedly, Customer obsession is the single number one reason we have been successful at Amazon. He has never, to my knowledge, ever said we win because of branding. If you look, Casey, at the trucks that are delivering your packages today from Amazon, they don't even have the name Amazon on the side of the truck, right? Why not? Because it's not a branding game. Amazon's playing a customer obsession game, okay? Well, what does that mean? It means they're all about the customer. And, a lot of companies will say, oh, we're really, we're customer focused and customer, not Amazon. Amazon is customer obsessed. Their number one leadership principle on their website for Amazon employees, customer obsession. At the board meetings, Jeff Bezos would have a separate empty chair, literally an empty chair representing the customer, okay, at his board meetings. 80%, over 80% of Amazon's metrics are customer metrics. Okay, so delivery rates, accuracy rates, etc. It's all about making sure the customers are happy and pleased, right? And nobody does that better than Amazon. Nobody in the world. They have played their game. They have become the most valuable retailer in the world, passing Walmart. Walmart's having to react to them. Amazon comes out with Amazon Prime. Well, Amazon Prime, when it was brought out back in 2005, even Jeff Bezos' own employees and executives said to him, this is going to be a money loser initially. This doesn't look like such a great idea. He said, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to draw a moat around our best customers. He then proceeded to implement Amazon Prime, and they found that on average, a Amazon Prime member spent 7 times as much as a non-Amazon Prime member. And we all know we're now, many of us, locked into that system.
Yeah, of course.
And what's happened is they have set the bar. Every other company has to deliver within 1 or 2 days, or in some cases even hours, that Amazon can deliver. Or you're like, oh, they're not as good as Amazon, right? So it's classic customer obsession. So and what's interesting about it is not only does Jeff Bezos say it and feel it, but every single delivery person knows it's all about the customer. It's all about customer obsession. So it's alignment throughout the organization. You will hear the people at Amazon, when they talk internally, it's all about customer obsession. So that's Alignable. Yep.
So we've got the agenda. We're communicating it.
Yep.
Is there a magical third step that sees it all?
Yes. This
Come
is
to
the
fruition?
execution.
Execution.
Right. So it's what I refer to as championing the agenda. Championing the agenda. And I basically have developed 4 A's, okay, for championing the agenda. And this is very different than the 4 P's many people know about in traditional marketing, price, place, promotion, product, etc. That's the old way to think. In the Transcender System, the best companies think in terms of the 4 A's. They are basically access, advantages, evangelicals, and awareness. So access for these companies, it's no longer about price like we had before. It's access. So for instance, a cup of coffee at Starbucks gives you so much more access than what you're paying for, right? You're paying for just a cup of coffee, but at Starbucks, you get access to being at Starbucks for potentially hours, whereas you don't get that, say, at a typical Dunkin' Donuts or other coffee shop, right? You can't.
They're not pleasant. It's plastic, and you don't want to be there.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. Then you have advantages. And to me, probably the best example of really having a lot of advantages, because transcenders don't try to have 2 or 3 brand differentiating advantages. They try to have numerous advantages, right? So Elon Musk, the Tesla cars have numerous advantages. I literally call it the S. I think in terms of S's for all the pluralities of advantages that Tesla has. So first, it starts with savings, right? So Tesla's campaign agenda is transitioning to sustainable energy. Okay, it's all about the transition to sustainable energy. So if you're inspired by that and you believe in that, which of course a lot of people do, right? And if they can afford, obviously, a Tesla, then they often will buy those cars. Now, so the advantage they have, number one, they save the planet, right? In terms of energy emissions. They save money. Their cars, particularly some of their more mass market cars, are actually cheaper than many other electric cars. They can offer insurance cheaper right now in California, and they're spreading it out because they know exactly what their insurance cost or maintenance costs are going to be for these cars. They also have a different sales model. They basically said, you don't even have to go to the store. You can literally go online in less than 5 minutes, buy your car, right? That was never done before. That was really, again, a major advantage they have. Safety, their 2018 Model S was considered the safest mass market car ever at that point in time, okay? Stations, so they have these, obviously the stations, the charging stations around the country that they built, right? And then you have all these other S's, you know, and all these other advantages. The software, people feel like overnight they got a new car. So they have all these advantages. That's so different. They basically created a revolutionary product as opposed to an evolutionary product. Okay. You know, you see the traditional car manufacturers, let's say for pickups, they'll say, you know what, our pickup this year has better towing capacity, right? Or it has a bigger flatbed. Okay. Well, that's not where Tesla's going. Tesla's like saying, we're totally redesigning the car. Yeah. The whole concept. It's an experience. I don't know if you've driven a Tesla, but that car, it doesn't need a road. It needs a runway. I mean, it's that fast, right? So that's another.
Yeah, you're looking for the next straightaway, so you can test that 0 to 80 in 0.
yeah. In less than 2 seconds at this point that they have.
Yeah.
Now. So
it just goes, right? It just decides to go that fast.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I've never felt G-forces in a car like that. But anyway, so that's, again, that's the advantages. And then I talked about the evangelicals. Okay. You know, whether you hear somebody at Tesla talking about their car or Peloton, or even people saying, I got to meet you at Starbucks, whatever, these are the evangelicals. They go way beyond the product advocates that we have in traditional branding world. And then awareness. Like any election, you have to have huge awareness, right? We know what certainly Trump did in terms of owning the airwaves, right? Obama also at the DNC National Convention, when he first was the keynote speaker in 2004, he had a huge awareness that night, etc. So there are companies that do that as well. I'd say one of the best was probably Carrie Hammer Fashion. You might not have heard of that particular company. You know, you and I aren't going to be using or wearing her clothes. So right. Carrie Hammer is a entrepreneur, young entrepreneur who basically was designing clothes for professional women. And she got the opportunity about 3 years after she opened her company in 2014 to show her clothes on the New York City Council Fashion Runway in New York City, which is the biggest fashion show in America, highest profile show in America. And at that show, she was basically trying her clothes on the traditional models, right? Now, these models are much younger than her audience that she's really gearing towards, and they're much thinner and this and that. And she had an aha moment. She said, you know, this doesn't work for me. These traditional models, this traditional runway show doesn't work for me. I'm going to focus on role models. So her agenda became role models, not runway models. 5 words, role models, not runway models. So what she did is she featured role models, female role models, everything from CEOs, female leading scientists, policymakers, but perhaps most notably, a woman, a psychotherapist named Danielle Pashuk, who is a wheelchair-bound woman, the first wheelchair-bound woman to model clothes on that particular runway. She also featured Jamie Brewer from the horror show, an actress who has Down syndrome. 6 months later, she inspired a woman from her first fashion show who contacted her, a woman named Karen Crespin. Karen Crespin had had a serious bacterial infection that caused her to lose all 4 of her limbs. She had all 4 limbs amputated. She had prostheses for all 4 limbs, so she was a quadruple amputee. She was also featured on the runway in Carrie Hammer clothes. You know, so what you see there is the awareness. It basically generated over 1 billion impressions on the internet, 1 billion. Fox News called it the runway revolution. It has become a big deal. It has changed how people think about fashion shows and runway shows. This idea of role models, not runway models, again, a 5-word campaign agenda. And Carrie Hammer really has changed the paradigm. She was a game changer in regard to raising awareness and with her agenda. So those are some of the different ways to execute on the agenda, specifically champion the agenda.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, there's a lot to this. Clearly, you're a brilliant guy. I'd love to sort of wrap this up in a bow here. Obviously, there's a book that needs to be read here, and people need to go get it, right? Because podcasts, we only scratch the surface on purpose. It's like purposeful torture. You gave me a little bit, but one of the things, I know you consult with people to help them create this. A lot of times we have existing brands that are just doing amazingly well, and devil's advocate, can we just ascribe things to their success? That, I mean, was that what did it? And when, maybe this ties into my question, like if you're working with one of the companies that's listening today, they don't feel very sexy, they haven't done anything on your list, they've got an okay logo, what kind of recommendations do you make first to them? And how do you coach the mediocre brand, and brand doesn't even matter, how do you coach the mediocre campaign, the mediocre company into being one of these superstars?
Yeah. So this is really, honestly, this is, most of my clients come to me. They come to me saying, you know what, we feel like we have a comparable or even better product and we're losing. Or they come to me and say, you know, we're always having to react to our competitor, or we're frustrated, we're not meeting our budgets, all these kinds of things, right? And so I then explain to them about the Transcender System, and I tell them the steps we can take to move them from being a traditionalist branding company to a winning transcender company, okay? Because it's very simple. If you just want to compete, then brand. You'll have plenty of competition. But if you want to win, then transcend. Use the Transcender System to rise above your competitors, force them to play your game. So I typically will offer any number of different types of workshops. The simplest is a seminar, you know, so a seminar just to explain to them the Transcender System. That can be typically 1 or 2 hours. I can also offer training workshops. So I train companies and their professionals on how to do this. And then we have also what I call business war games, okay, Transcender war games. And what we do is we role play our competitors, then come back and role play ourselves, using this approach, coming up ultimately with our own campaign agenda, our own campaign platform. That's the second step, communicating the agenda with a campaign platform, just like a presidential candidate, and 4 at most 5 winning actions based on those 4 A's. Okay, so we basically do those war games to dramatically change the trajectory of a company. And you ask me, how do you know the difference? Well, I see it. I've seen it hundreds of times at this point, where companies that go from being traditional companies to being transcender companies, they have what I call a transcendent takeoff. You see a dramatic increase in their sales and their market share. I've seen literally anything from smaller companies gaining millions of dollars to bigger Fortune 100 companies gaining billions of dollars using this. So I know it works. I have had even transcender companies come to me, and I have worked with them to take them to a new level, right? Because there's no perfect transcender company. And I've had the opportunity to work with so many different companies and have such a, quite frankly, a database of different ways to compete and win and so forth, that I can help even the best of the best. And so it's very satisfying, because I love to help my clients win. That's what I do. I do it with the Transcender System. I think the book is a good first place to start for people if they want to read about it and are interested in this approach. And then if they're interested in going beyond that with their company and getting their company aligned to become a transcender, then they should contact my firm, Bernard Associates.
What's the first step? You're working with a client. What's the first step?
First step is creating the agenda. Creating the agenda. And I think I will say there's one.
What's the first step of creating the agenda?
Yeah. So there is I do need to prepare the clients. Okay. I have to change their mindset. Okay. So I do a little sort of shock therapy, transcender shock therapy, which is cool. I show them, here are examples, typically in their particular industry or analogs of their products. Here's what these other companies have done. And they see it through a different lens. Okay. It's a different frame of reference. I show them that they don't win with branding. They win with this political playbook, not a product playbook. And so they see 2, 3, 4 examples, and then they all pretty much all go, I get it. The light bulb goes off. It's like people, I almost use the analogy of people saying, they think the branding world is flat. I take them up to the space station and I show them the transcender world is round. And once they see the transcender system and the transcender world, they can never go back to the brand world again. It's like you basically realize, oh, the brand world is flat. There's so many other ways to compete. We can play our own game. So that is really the first start, is changing their minds. Okay. And showing that through a number of examples. And then once they see it, then they're more open to saying, okay, tell me how we can do that. Tell me how, whether I'm a CEO or I'm a professional, a manager, a salesperson, a marketing person, supply chain, it doesn't matter, because transcenders are throughout the company. Everybody has to be a transcender in the company. Everybody has to be aligned with the agenda, whether you're at Amazon, Starbucks, or wherever. So therefore, everybody needs to be aligned. And by the end of either 1 or 2 day workshop, we get people to that point. They will come up with a campaign agenda, typically 5 words or fewer. The campaign platform, it's one sheet of paper that everybody uses for communications. The same communications over and over and over again, very much like Geico, 15 minutes, 15%. Okay. And then
where do they find that? Where you've shocked them. I feel like everyone listening is pleasantly shocked enough. You've beaten us down with all these examples, and we're kind of like, okay, we're in, but then it seems like there's a little bit of magic between now we need to create. Do they look toward the features? Do they look toward the pain of the customers? Where do you find that initial campaign message?
Yeah, the initial campaign agenda. There's some magic to that. And I have been doing this for many years now and helping clients get there. So I have the steps and I show them the process, but in the workshops, I really do take them to the promised land. I have analogs. I have a certain idea. Typically, I work very close with my clients. They know their industry much better than I do, but, and I know the Transcender System. So together, we work together to say, okay, what are some potential agendas? I work with them over a period of a few weeks typically, and then we'll have the workshop where we actually go through the process. And at the end of the workshop, either day 1, day 2, we come up with an agenda. But you're right, there is some magic to it.
Okay.
And because not every agenda, believe me, I've heard thousands of agendas from, clients and others, and, they're 5 words or fewer, but they're not winning agendas. They're not ownable necessarily. They're not alignable. So there is this process we go through.
Yeah. That's what I'm definitely feeling. I feel angsty because I don't quite have the ability to replicate what you're talking about.
Yeah, I understand. And it does help. I think the book definitely gives people a great start. Mm-hmm. There are some people that can, using the book, they can come up with a reasonable agenda. Others want to go much further at their company, or whether it's a CEO or some other senior executive that says, you know what, we need to do this. We need to have everybody on the same page. Everybody's aligned, saying the same thing, doing the same thing, inspiring people to believe in, not just buy in, but believe in our products and what we're offering.
Right. Powerful stuff, man. You got some experience there. So my next question really is, who are you? How do you know all these things? Take me back in time to little Stan days. What was it like growing up? Did you always know you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a brander, a brand killer, transcender, all these things?
Haven't been called a brand killer before. That's a good one. So, I'll tell you where it started. It started when I was really about 6, 7 years old, and I was a huge sports fan. At the time, I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, and my college team, we didn't have a professional sports team. Our college team was Vanderbilt. Okay, now Vanderbilt University was actually very good in basketball, very competitive, but in football, we were horrible. And every year, Alabama would come in and just crush us, in the first, really by the first quarter.
Who did? Alabama?
Alabama, yeah. And at that time, their coach was the legendary Paul Bear Bryant, who was the most successful, the winningest coach in college football at that time, with 6 national titles. Okay. And so I would say to my father every year, like, why does Alabama always win and Vanderbilt always lose? Because I was fascinated with how teams at that time, how they win, right? And why do they always win? And
Mm-hmm.
so he would explain to me, well, actually, Paul Bear Bryant, the coach, has a system, and it's based on player development, player recruitment, all that kind of stuff. And then, you fast forward, 30, 40 years later, and his successor at Alabama, of course, is Nick Saban, who is the winningest coach in college football now with 7 titles, past Bear Bryant. And he has a winning system. So his winning system is called the process. Many people in college football know this. And again, it's based a lot on player identification, preparation, identification, recruitment, etc. And he won using that system. And part of that system he actually borrowed from Bill Belichick, who was the coach, his coach, actually.
Absolutely. Go Pats.
Yeah. And in the Pats, obviously, Belichick has had the most Super Bowl wins of any coach. Saban worked for him in the 1990s as a Cleveland Browns assistant coach. So he borrowed it from that. And then I'd also seen, Moneyball's a winning system in sports, in baseball, and John Wooden had a winning system at UCLA, 10 titles, et cetera. He had his pyramid of success. So I knew from an early age,
quick, the Browns had Belichick and Saban at one particular point in time. Is that why they're cursed to always be the worst team in the league ever? I mean, are they still even in the NFL? I thought maybe they moved to Canadian football. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
It's amazing, right? That they would have those 2 coaches and weren't winning. But yes, Belichick was the coach. Saban was basically an assistant coach working with Belichick. So and they still didn't win back then, but they really didn't. They did not have a quarterback, that's for sure. So ultimately, as you see, once Belichick got a quarterback, he took off. But anyway, so I knew there were winning systems growing up, right, in sports. So when I first got into business, I literally, well, I'll tell you what I did. At the time I was planning to be a doctor. My father was a surgeon. I was going to be a surgeon, and I realized, I actually like this strategy stuff. So when I was in medical school, in a 3rd and 4th year med school, I started doing consulting on the side. Okay. The first company I went to was Beacon Van Lines. It's a moving company. And I said to him, guys, I have a way, I think I can help you win in the Texas Medical Center, which is the biggest medical center in the world. There's all these things I think you could do to really own this place, and because people are moving in and out all the time, new doctors, new nurses, new etc. And they said, okay, let's do it. So I basically had this tiny little consulting project. That's where I started. My second client was actually Stanley Kaplan Educational Centers. I said, oh, you guys can own the medical center, because all these doctors and nurses and pharmacists, they all have to take these tests and boards and things like that, and I can help you win. And so I quickly realized I actually preferred strategy over surgery. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I ended up finishing medical school. I took the boards. I got licensed. I'm a licensed general practitioner, didn't practice, and I went back to business school. So I went to Wharton School of Business, and I found my true love, which is really sort of competitive strategy and strategic marketing. And so that's where, and then I went to work for Bristol Myers Squibb, which is absolutely a branding company. I mean, people know Bristol Myers Squibb is both consumer products, pharmaceutical, medical devices, et cetera, lots of different brands. And when I first became a product manager there, literally like the first or second day, one of my colleagues on the teams, said, oh, we're going to have the advertising agency tell us our strategy. And I'm like, what do you mean they're going to tell us our strategy? I thought we're the product managers, and they're like, no, they'll come and do every, they do. I'm like, well, why don't we come up with our own strategy? And why does it have to necessarily be based on branding? And I can tell you, I could have dropped a pin in the room, right? The 2 or 3 people around me looked at me like, what do you mean? Don't you understand branding is the only way to compete? And that was my aha moment. Wow. I'm like, wow, guys, you only believe there's one way to compete? Because I know in sports, I've known since I was a little kid, there's lots of different ways to compete,
Yeah.
All these different coaches have different playbooks, and they have different ways to win and compete, and you're telling me that in business, there's only one way to compete? It gets back to this myth and this mythology that that's the only way to compete. And so that's when I said, you know what, there's an opportunity here.
Wow.
I can help people win. And I'm going to develop a system, which ultimately was the Transcender System. I'm going to develop a system based on the best of the best. I'm going to study the best of the best and come up with this system. And so that's where we are today.
You mentioned that, in football, you're going for the win. You're going to do whatever you need to do. And I think, Belichick's a good example of that, when you're just modifying what you got and make it more than one person. Maybe it's this. Also reminds me of like I don't know if it's a college football or high school football coach who never punts. Have you ever heard that guy? Never
Yeah,
punts.
right.
He's
You
like
know, so
statistically.
right. So these are examples of really different playbooks,
Yeah.
different ways, systems for winning, right?
Right.
So a very simple example in basketball, sometimes you have fast court teams and you have half court teams, right? And whoever can force their will on the other team usually wins. So if the fast court team can make it a fast court game, they'll win and vice versa, right? Well, that's exactly what happens in business. You force your competitor to play your game. Now, the advantage is transcenders don't have a lot of competitors that play the transcender game right now. So for the listeners, if you start playing a transcender game and doing this approach, using this transcender system, you will have a tremendous, not competitive advantage, because that's too small. You will have a transcendent advantage. Now, there are cases where transcenders go against each other. Okay, so you have situations, and we all see it, where Apple is now competing against Amazon, which is competing against Google in a variety of different areas, right? They're all transcender companies. They all have their own agenda. They all have their own ways of playing, their own systems for winning. And you see sometimes one wins, sometimes the other. It's a little like King Kong versus Godzilla, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but in most spaces, in most competitive spaces, you can be the only transcender. And I can assure you, if you're playing a game only you can win, you will win.
Yeah. Man. What an adventure. And you liked strategy over surgery. What a cool revelation to make. But it had to be kind of tough. You just spent how many years in medical school and then made that call. But hey, did you ever pull anything from the medical side into business?
I did. You know, it turned out it was a great thing. It was an opportunistic thing that I did to go to med school, because med school taught me a number of things. One thing it taught me is don't make assumptions. You can't assume things in medicine. You assume things in medicine as a doctor, and patients can get hurt or even die, right? You can't make assumptions. So you really challenge the thinking. So for instance, if a patient comes to me and they have a certain diagnosis, I can't assume that's necessarily the case. I have to make my own diagnosis. I have to do my own evaluation and come up with my own diagnosis and my own treatment plan. Well, that's what happened when I got into business. So I was quick to basically say to people, wait, you know, what do you mean branding is the only way to play? No, let's challenge that. You know, so I was trained to, first of all, be willing to challenge assumptions, right? And so that was one thing that's very helpful. The other thing that was, medicine is very similar in terms of sort of the 3 steps. You sort of go through the evaluation, you know, a history, physical, all that, and then you go through your diagnosis stage and you go through your treatment. Well, really, businesses do the same thing. I do the same thing with businesses. I go to businesses and I say, okay, what's the issue, right? I'm going to sort of figure out, do my history physical, so to speak, of a corporate client, whether it's a one-person startup or a top 100 Fortune company. Then I'm going to make a diagnosis. Okay, here's the situation. You know, here's what's the problem or issue. And then I basically come up with my treatment plan, which is action. So I've been trained very much to be action oriented, right?
Yeah.
But to take those actions based on a really, really in-depth analysis, so that we make sure we're taking the right actions to win, the same way I would do that, or any doctor would do that with a patient. So it's been extremely helpful to me in terms of my sort of competitive approach and transcender mindset.
Yeah, and it gives you the most interesting, unique background ever. You know, where it's like interesting, a doctor and an MBA and all these things together. That multiple perspectives coming in, and I'm sure you are able to discern the difference between, you know, the company is telling you their symptoms, you know, and the signs might point to something completely different, but something completely unrelated. You know, there's some sort of referring pain that's going on that is, you know, distracting everyone else. And you're like, you know, that might actually be down lower, actually sending some signals elsewhere.
Right. So this diagnostic, you know, being trained as a diagnostician, which all physicians are, was extremely helpful.
I bet.
And then, you know, that coupled with the orientation to get the right answer, and then to act on it. So, and I probably had a little more of a surgical personality. So surgeons like to, okay, we figured it out. Let's now, let's do the surgery. Let's make sure we treat the patient, they're well, etc. So that helped. And I think the other thing that helped me a lot was I had a very cross-disciplinary, multifunctional, and cross-geographic training at Bristol Myers Squibb. I actually had 6 jobs in 6 years. Okay. Which is extremely unusual in the pharmaceutical industry that I worked in. But it gave me the perspective because I worked in marketing, I worked in the field, I worked in, the clinical piece and medical piece. I worked in business development. I worked in the US, I worked ex-US. So it gave me a very broad perspective. So when I'm working with clients, I can talk to the marketing person. I can talk to the product design person. I can talk to the manufacturing person. I've just had a lot of different experiences, which really also helps me better see the full elephant, so to speak.
Gotcha, man. Crazy. Stan, where do people go? They want to connect with you. Throw some social platforms out at us, throw out websites, all the things.
Sure.
The book, everything you can get.
Simplest way to connect is to go to brandsdon'twin.com. Just go to the website, brandsdon'twin.com. On the website, you can get more information about the book. You can take a quiz, a 10-question quiz. Are you a transcender or a traditionalist? You can download the first chapter, and you can also access purchasing the book, as well as getting in contact with myself and my firm, Bernard Associates. So that's brandsdon'twin.com. So again, if you want to win, transcend.
Love that, man. Thank you so much for coming on here, schooling us, going through the intense 3 different steps with their sub steps and their subroutines and the systems and the organs and all the things that makes up all those different parts. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Casey, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And for those out there listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did because my brain is on fire and I've got 2 pages of notes over here, front and back, share this with someone else. Be a thought leader by simply sharing some amazing, powerful, game-changing, game-transcending information with other people. And that's how you really pass that message along. So again, man, Stan, I appreciate you being on here.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Everybody, that is crazy. Let's go put water on our brains. Let's try to digest. Let's try to think about how we can use this information and crush it. And for those out there listening, this has been another episode of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will catch you all next time.